Hello, friends. This is Dolores Williams of DW's View Stand Up. If we do not stand up for what we believe, who will? This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. My sponsor helps keep this podcast on the air. If you are a leader, professional, or entrepreneur who is feeling frustrated, anxious because you're not performing at the level you know that you're capable of, then unlock your life today and get your complimentary strategy session with Coach Kim at unlockyourlifecoach.com. And to my audience, I want to thank each of you for listening and watching this podcast. I'm excited to introduce my special guest, Mr. Michael Alexander. Here's a little bit about Michael. Michael Alexander is the founder and president of the California School Choice Foundation. His organization has prepared a California School Choice initiative for the 2022 statewide ballot that would create an educational savings account for each K-12 child in California to be used at a school of the parent's choice. Help me welcome to DW's View, Mr. Michael Alexander. Good morning, Michael. Welcome to DW's View. Stand up.
Great. Please call me Mike or Michael, whatever you want. Thank you for a very gracious invitation. And yes, I agree with you that one scriptural passage, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. And it never applied more or better than to California here. Despite the challenges that we have, we still live in the greatest state, in the greatest country, in the greatest time in the history of this world. At no other time have we been more blessed with physical or cultural opportunities. Like every other civilization in the past, however, we face our challenges, and chief among them are the challenges that we face in educating our youth. Everybody, from the time that we started working our way out of caves and started to form groups, villages, and cities, we have encountered this challenge. How is it that we educate and prepare our youth for the future? And here in the state of California, we find that our children are forced to attend schools that were once among the best and now among the worst in the state, in the country. California schools rank right down there near the bottom at 48th. And there's no excuse for it, Dolores, because right now in our state, we spend over $20,000 per year per student, and even more in the inner cities, believe it or not, where they have nothing but an unvarnished record of failure. And we in the California School Choice movement, which is nonpartisan, non-sectarian, transcends race, ethnicity, country of origin, or whatever team you root for. You know, we're all together here in California, joined in our concern about children. And this is why we have chosen to draft and bring forth the California School Choice Initiative entitled the Educational Freedom Act. Now, I'll let you ask more questions. You can direct me. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for bringing out that introduction. Now, do you have children yourself, Michael? Are you a parent?
Oh, yes, I do. I have 4 grown children and 11 grandchildren. So my wife and I raised 4 sons here in Southern California. I live here in Pasadena, California, and all of our kids, just as I benefited from school choice, that is my parents' choice to send me to private school, my wife and I were able to make those choices for our children as well. And like most parents who send their children to private school, we did so at great personal sacrifice. Private schools are not occupied only by the rich. There are a lot of people who have to make a lot of sacrifices to send their children to school. All of my kids went to Catholic school like I did. So yes, I do have children. I know what parents are dealing with.
Amen. Amen. And it is a sacrifice. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, we've looked all over the country, Michael, and we see what's happening in the schools, what's happening to parents who are standing up for their children.
yeah.
Now, will you think you will get pushback from the teachers union? Because
Right. That's yeah. When you try to take a dog's meal from you, do you think you get pushed back from that Doberman? Oh yeah, yeah. Hey, they're living tall. They're doing fine. Those people have a monopoly over 40% of the California budget, actually more. They spend over $100 billion a year, not including bond issues and local taxes. Just the state alone spends over $100 billion a year. And Dolores, they're not turning loose of that kind of money, not at all. They're going to fight us, and also you need to, as I'm sure you do, that the fight is not just over the money, Dolores. They covet, they demand ownership of your child's heart, mind, and soul. They're
yes,
going a very different direction. These are very dark forces. And how do we know that they're dark forces? Because they're not just trying to hang on to a financial monopoly to make sure that their people control hundreds of billions of dollars. If only that were the case, we might be able to negotiate something. We might still have quality education. We might still have good cultural and moral formation, but they don't. They are actually in a fight with you and with me and with every other parent for control of the child's mind, because they have in mind a very different vision of the future. They have a different vision of our country. In fact, as we know, in practice, they hate God, they hate America, they hate you, and they want to get you and me to hate each other because our hair and our face color is a little bit different. That's what they're up to, believe it
yes.
or not.
Michael, I believe you,
Yeah.
and I totally agree with you. And I know what you speak is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that I know we won't talk a lot about CRT, but that's
Yeah.
probably a subject for another day.
Yeah,
That's
it
being
is.
used to divide and conquer, to destroy
Correct.
the minds of our children, to divide this country. It's
Yep.
been used not just it's been used everywhere. Michael, I look at the military. I know you're a military man. I look at what's
Yeah.
happening in our military, how everything is so woke. And if you criticize, if you say anything against what the establishment is saying, then you get canceled in this culture. And that's just not
right.
America. That's not the America that we know and love.
No,
And
it
that's
is not.
why I appreciate what you're doing, this fight, this battle that you're bringing forward. I really appreciate what you're doing for parents and for those who love, not just love the country, but love their children and all children. And it's not about, Michael, it's not about color of skin. And being a Black woman, I get so tired of people using race to divide us.
That's correct.
Michael, I tell my family, and I've said on this podcast, and I'll say again, if we peel the skin off, we're all the same. We're all God's children. Not one of us can control what color we are. We can't control what we look like. We can't control anything because God created us all in His image.
That's right.
And so we've got to get away from this race baiting and hating each other based on skin color, and using that.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we find so many ways to divide ourselves. Yes. And they want to introduce new ways to define ourselves, including our sexual proclivities,
yes,
such as they may be. And this institution, which is the government, let's not call it a school system.
Exactly.
This government school system. Yep. It's an indoctrination system, and they want to interfere between you and your children. Let's take this opportunity, Dolores, to describe the provisions of the Educational Freedom Act. And by the way, for those in your audience who want to know more about who we are and what we do, please go to californiaschoolchoice.org. Again, californiaschoolchoice.org, all spelled out. And there you will find a copy of this petition that we're now running, the Educational Freedom Act. We're actively gathering signatures. Now, this initiative here, which is to be qualified and placed on the ballot in November of 22, that is less than a year from now, we will be presenting to the public and parents the opportunity to regain control of their children's education. The Educational Freedom Act has 4 key features. Number one, it creates, on the request of any parent wanting to leave the government school system, creates an educational savings account. ESA is the buzzword. It'll create an education savings account for any child, any K-12 child, on the request of the parent. Number two, annually, that account will be credited with that child's share of basic educational funding in California, sometimes known as Proposition 98. And that currently is $14,000 per year per child. Now, that's not all that is spent, but that is the basic educational funding amount. Number three, you, the parents, not the zip code, not the school board, not the union member, or some faceless, nameless, ugly bureaucrat, will be able to direct those trust funds to a participating private religious or a private school or an accredited religious school. And number four, save any money that you have left over for college, vocational training, or other qualified educational expense. It applies to every child in California, every K-12 child, without regard to their income, where they live. In other words, just like the current public so-called education system that we have right now, the public schools, everybody goes, rich, poor, everywhere in between, wherever you are, wherever you came from, even legal, illegal. If you're a kid, if you're K, somewhere between K and 12, you're entitled to an education, and we're going to see to it that you get it. And if you want to, you can make that a private education. That's your choice. Now, if you don't want to all those people say, well, Mike, isn't the system going to destroy the public schools? And my answer to that is, no, you already did that. We're already at 48. So let's get that straight right away. But second, we do not affect how public schools are funded, how they're managed, or anything else. We just let the money follow the child and let the parents make the choices about those children. And to paraphrase a very close personal friend of mine, if you like your public school, you can keep your public school. And if you like your public school teacher, well, you can keep her too, right? We're not changing it. Nobody has to leave. So however your school district is being managed right now, that's how it will be managed in the future. We can't fix it. We're not going to try. You're just going to have to do all of what you're doing without me and my kids. Mine are grown, of course. I've got grandchildren in the system. My grandchildren actually go to private school. But Dolores, I don't need to tell you, ma'am, that not everybody in this state can afford private schools, even if they're sacrificing. So if you take a single mom, first of all, if you don't have enough money to move into a zip code with a really good school district, you're stuck where you are, and you can't move. You're owned by that. You don't have a name. You don't have a face. What you've got is a zip code. And if you're in that zip code, they own you. You have to go to that school. You can't get out of there, man. Talk about modern servitude. It is amazing. And so in California, Dolores, only about 7% of all of our 6.2 million K-12 children go to private school. Only about 6 point. So only 7%.
That's a lot of kids under government control.
Oh, wow. It is outrageous. And yet when we take polls here in California and throughout the country, we find the 70%, let's just talk about Democrats. Now, this is not a partisan issue. Let's just take Democrats. 70% of Latino and Black Democrats support school choice. Even half of the other Democrats, which should basically be white, even half of them support school choice. So we got 70% of the population support school choice, but only 7% actually go to private schools. So what explains the difference? Easy, money, our money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Dolores, you probably have some questions to ask. You go ahead. It's your show. I want to go the direction you want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate because I'm listening because I want you to share the information that you're sharing, and it's good information that people need to know. Now, when this initiative passes, what date would it go into effect, and how would the parents actually have control of these accounts?
Oh, great questions. First of all, when it passes this coming November 2022, with your help and ours and God's will, it'll go into effect for the 23-24 academic year. So it'll pass in November. Parents will be able to make their choices, request the establishment of an education savings account by say end of March, first part of April, and then it will anticipate getting started in the academic year of the following year. So this would be passed in November, and it would apply to the school year starting in September of 23. Excuse me.
Okay.
Now, how does it work? Here's the way that it works. It's fairly simple. Parents never touch the money. So a trust account is established, an education savings account trust fund is established by this initiative in Sacramento, and all the funds are sent directly from the state of California to the trust fund, and they hold it there. You and I don't touch that money of our children. We don't get paid for educating our children. They don't give us the money, then we take it somewhere else. It's a savings account. Now, what you do is to go out and find a participating private accredited school that wants to benefit. So we've got tons of it, of private schools that are ready, able, and willing to do. We've got a lot of churches that really want to get back into the school business so that they can raise their children, educate them properly, be in charge of their moral formation and their religious formation. All of us want to be able to raise our children in our faith, and that's appropriate. And that's the great American tradition. Okay, so the school that you go to, they file an application with the trust fund manager, and they prove that they're an accredited school. They sign a participation agreement, and away we go. And the student signs up a contract. That contract is forwarded to the trust fund manager, and then it gets paid in 9 equal monthly installments commencing August 15th of each year. That way we pay very close attention to the schools that actually have to operate under this mechanism and get and cash flow. It's very, very important.
Oh, that's great. And parents also have the option, if they want to switch their kids to a different school, they also have that option as well.
That's right. That's right. Here's what really happens. What's most important. Oh, before I do that, let me talk about this. A lot of people have left the public school system are homeschooling, and many have before. So there's a lot of homeschoolers in our state. And I'm frequently asked whether this education savings account applies to homeschoolers. And the answer is yes, it does apply. And anybody who wants to homeschool can do so, but they can apply for an education savings account, and then it will still be funded. Now, they can't be paid for teaching their own kid. All right, so you can't just all of a sudden make yourself a professor and cash a check. No, that has to be an accredited school. But the homeschoolers can save that money up, right? That $14,000 a year plus investment earnings. It's part of the investment pool that directs those and manages those funds. They can save it. Then maybe a family says, hey, look, I can handle my kids and their education. I can handle it to 6th grade, maybe even 8th grade. But I've got especially boys, they're gonna want to be in athletics that are maybe only available to them at a regular larger school. Okay, so now you take your money, and by the way, high school is more expensive, as you know, than grammar school. So you're going to need those extra bucks. Well, you've got them saved up because you're the customer. And let's talk, Dolores, for a minute about what it means to be a customer. The lowliest bum on the street with no name, no life, no future. He's got money in his hands, but he's a customer and he has to be treated with respect. You can't just give him anything. He has his 10, 20 bucks that he's going to spend on lunch, and it better be value for his money. But when it comes to something like our children, and when somebody is being paid $20,000 a year for each one of your kids, and you have a problem, and you go in there and you try to get some satisfaction, you get the back of their hand. Yeah. Dolores, you've had children, I assume, in the system. Yeah. Is there any worse customer experience in the world than being a parent in K-8? Nothing. You're treated badly. And that's even in some private schools.
Oh, yeah.
They just don't listen to you, and there's more where you came from, or they start lying to you and they ignore you. Now, can you imagine? It is bad enough being poor. Now, can you imagine being somebody from LAUSD where the Latino population is over 80% in that school district? Can you imagine not even being able to speak a lick of English and then try to go to that system and talk to people about your children when you can't even habla? Can you imagine? They ignore these people. They take us for granted, and they abuse us. Now, that lady there, under the current system, she's Lupita with 3 kids, if you even know her name or care. But here, after a year from now, she's going to go because she's going to control not only 42,000, 3 times 14, not only $42,000 of scholarship money. When Lupita and her 3 niños leave that system in Los Angeles, she's actually going to take with her over $100,000 in revenue because they're picking up $35,000 a year, $35,000 a year on that kid in LAUSD that they're not educating at all. She's going to take $100,000. Now, at that moment, she goes from being nobody to being a customer. She goes from being Lupita to Mrs. Morales. Mm-hmm. Good morning, Mrs. Morales. How are you today? Have you had coffee yet this morning, Miss? How can we help you? Right? Because they're looking at losing at $100,000. The biggest thing about this, Dolores, for you and me and every other parent or grandparent, is that this introduces competition into the system. And when you, as you know, when you go into a restaurant with your $100, you go into a car lot with your $20,000 and your credit and so forth. They may not like white people, they may not like black people, gringos, Mexicans, or whatever else, but they like that money.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Money, and they'll find a way to deal with respect for that. Yes. Most people will deal respectfully anyway, but in the bureaucracies, they don't care. And you say, hey, look, I don't want you teaching my kids all this LGBTQ garbage, right?
Yes.
All right. That's your kid, not theirs. And they start lying to you. Or you say, hey, look, we've had enough race problems in this country to last for 200 years. I think we got it about right. I just as soon leave it where it is. Maybe we could teach our kids real civics and whatnot. They do what they want.
Yes.
Right.
That's so true.
And you say, hey, look, you mean after fighting a civil war and going through the entire civil rights movement of the 20th century, including killing off Martin Luther King and riots and people getting shot. After all of this we went through, we're going to restart it? Really?
Yeah.
Who the hell thought that
ridiculous
up? I thought we had it halfway settled down.
Yep.
This is insanity to anybody who knows the darn thing. We finally got it to where we want it. Now people want to go out there and poke that snake and think that nothing will happen. No, that's not so. So we have to retake this institution and then take responsibility for our own children and raise them in the faith, doing our own moral formation, teaching them as we want. Now, you and I know that there's going to be a lot of people going to raise their kids different than you and I would. And there are people who are going to raise them in other religions, perhaps Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or a whole variety. It's their children, not mine. God put them in charge, not me. And so if we go our own ways in America, we've got a fabulous country. And there's another thing I want to say, Dolores, that concerns me greatly. I run into, as you might imagine, the circles that I run in addition to running around the whole state in every possible neighborhood that I can get into. But I run into a lot of people with money, mostly white folks, say, well, my schools are working fine. I think I'm okay. Oh, well, I'm not surprised. You got an extra $1 million or $2 million to live in Piedmont or La Jolla or San Marino or Beverly Hills. I'm glad things are working out for you, lady. But there's for most of the kids in our state, things are not working out, and you need to be paying attention, because we're not educating people. We're developing this great, big, huge underclass in our state. Yep. And it's not characterized so much by race or social strata as it is by ignorance. So we've got a growing number of people who, a huge group, characterized by poverty, ignorance, crime, unemployment, and in our state and in the United States, we have always prided ourselves on social mobility, keeping, being able to move economically, socially, and politically up and down the range. That's what was wrong with racial discrimination, was that it was preventing that natural mobility from happening. So Black folks that should have been moving up and moving down, as the case may be, were getting stuck at various places in that system. Well, the thing that sticks you worse than being Black or some different race or culture, worse than that is just being stupid. You have no education. So in the United States, the predicate of all that, the foundation of social and political mobility has always been education. And that is broken now. And that's why, especially in the modern welfare state, you and I share the future of every one of those citizens and children that is stuck at the bottom. We share that fate. We can't escape from it. Now, as Christians, as believers, as men and women of faith, we don't want to be separated from our brethren, right? We do it because it's the right thing to do. But even if you're just selfish, if you're just thinking about you, hey, pay attention, because you're paying those bills, you're paying those price, and this huge outbreak of crime in our state should be a reminder to everybody who's sitting fat and happy behind a gated community, should be a reminder to all of them that you can't escape what's going on across the street. I'm sorry, I've gone on too long,
Oh,
Dolores.
no. I'm enjoying listening to you, Michael.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
and you're absolutely right, because I don't remember the name of the lady who was killed in her home just last week.
Yeah,
in Hollywood.
I forgot it too. Isn't that
Yeah,
terrible? We don't even
yeah,
know
it's
names.
terrible. Because where we live and lack of education affects every one of us. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in.
That's
Lack
right.
of education, just like that lady was killed in her home. She didn't go out looking for this criminal. This criminal went to
No.
her home.
That's right.
But see, when we put people in charge who take money from criminal people like George Soros and the such, and they sponsor these DAs, and we have no bail, where people can commit all kind of crimes, and they just let them right back out on the street.
Yes.
We don't do any. We do a disservice to our kids when we don't educate them, and when we put people in place, and we have to be accountable for what we do. That's why we have to train our kids up right from the beginning, so that they know how to conduct themselves, not just when they grow up. We have to start when they're young. That's why they want the minds of our children, and they want to create this initiative where, the government wants to take over, even from the womb all the way to the whole life. They want control. And it's all about controlling the mind. And that's what parents have to realize. The government wants control of the mind of our children. Now, I want you to talk about that Brown Act.
Yeah. Well, let's. You're a Black woman, a woman of color. This is a great opportunity to discuss the Black experience in the education system and show the route that was taking and what happened. We know that throughout inner cities here in the United States, where large portions of our Black population are, they're stuck in failing schools.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the 1950s. One of the most famous cases in American constitutional law is the case of Brown versus Board of Education. It's one of those few cases that every American might recognize, like Miranda or Escobedo, some of the Brown versus Board of Education, really important case. And there, that I think was a Kansas or Nebraska case, and the NAACP, Thurgood Marshall, a famous Black lawyer, great advocate, later Justice of the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall led the battle against that district, and his case was separate but equal ain't. Forgive the bad grammar. He said, because that school district had separate facilities for Black students, separate facilities for white students. All right, they did that. It had been upheld by a few courts and so forth. And Thurgood Marshall tried that case, took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which held that that was nonsense. Now, why was that lawsuit brought? It wasn't just a way to jumpstart the civil rights movement and make a reputation for Thurgood Marshall and NAACP. It wasn't just that they be seen that they were doing something about the plight of Blacks. No, it was based upon the fact that Black students under those arrangements did not, in fact, have equal access to quality education. So what happened? So Thurgood Marshall and a lot of people in the civil rights movement, Black, white, and otherwise, especially a lot of Jewish liberal intellectuals, pushed this whole idea of integration, which led to busing, which led to a lot of things, which led to white flight from the inner cities, all these kinds of things. Created tremendous social disruption, and ultimately 50, 70 years later, Black students as a group are doing just as bad, even worse than ever. So looking back on that experience from my perspective, I would say, well, look, the issue really was equal access to education. Now imagine, Dolores, if instead of trying to integrate the schools, we had simply given Black parents equal access to their money, their own taxes. And if the Black community had started then sending their children to private schools and had created, using their own money and their own communities, their own churches, had created schools with high academic standards and competition, Black parents would not today be sitting here taking what's given to them with no alternatives. This is outrageous, outrageous. And then what happens? The people who run the system then run out into the streets and they start saying, oh, all this educational failure, we need more money. And the only reason that our schools in the cities are failing is because of white racism, that garbage. Well, I'm here to tell people, now see, I grew up in these neighborhoods. We own businesses in Compton. I grew up in a neighborhood, by the time I left, it was 80-90% Latino. What the hell? Excuse me, this is a religious broadcast. What the heck? This is absolute nonsense. As I say in these neighborhoods, everybody needs to know, especially in the Black and Latino community, that guys like me that look like me, so white I'm almost pink, we want that education from you. For decades, people like me have voted for higher educational spending, bond issues. We paid for that, but the people that we gave the money to, the institution that came into control, refused to give you the education that we paid for. So now people like me, people who look like me, together with people who look like you and every other American in this state, and a lot of people who aren't even citizens, but are parents, we're here to make that happen, to make good on that promise that was made to the Black community in Brown versus Board of Education. We're here to make good on it and to give you access to the future that you're entitled to, and you don't have to vote Republican. You don't have to do what we ask somebody to do, because it's your right. Heck, you don't even need to like me. Just vote for yourselves and for your children. That's what I say when I'm out there. And if you guys do well, the way America is set up, if you do well, ultimately I'm going to do all right. That's the American dream. Right?
That's what's beautiful about America, Michael. And that's why I love this country. Mm-hmm. It's not based. People want to go back to slavery, and I see BLM and their agenda is evil, and it's not for the betterment of Blacks. It's not for the betterment of anyone, but it's all, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a slave mentality, and to put this country in a place that we've never been before, what our Constitution did not intend, and their agenda is pure evil. And I will say that. And that's the truth. It's not a good agenda, and it's not for Blacks. It's not for anybody. It's for them. When we look at Patrice Cullors and the homes that she's buying millions of dollars and they're spending money for, it's about self.
That's right.
About enriching themselves.
That's right. And the bureaucracy, and they get more power out of the deal.
Power and control. Power and control.
And now a lot of people are starting to get just the tiniest little taste of what it must have been like to be under the thumb of the plantation system in the South 150 years ago. We get just a little tiny taste, and we're upset, and that's why the Black experience of oppression, slavery, servitude is so useful to this new American movement, and that's why so many Black leaders are falling in behind school choice, is because it empowers everybody, and it makes your success and your family's education makes it your own. And the reason why they want to hang on to this political power is so that somebody can come to you and say, well, look, you got this education, you got this, you got that, and you got it because of me. Vote for me. Well, no, that's not the way. Nobody has to thank me for any of this stuff, because all we're doing is restoring the balance. Dolores, let me take a moment here and explain to your wonderful audience here how education, we'll call it education, how schools are funded, government schools are funded in California. And this will help you to understand what's going on. Proposition 98 was a constitutional amendment passed back in the 80s. And Proposition 98 basically earmarked a minimum of 40% of California state tax revenues for this enterprise they called the schools. Which means that if you live in California, you're going to be paying for K-12 education your whole life. From the time that you're 3 or 4 years old and you go to Disneyland or some amusement park and you put your $5 or $10 bill up there to buy some little souvenir that you got, you're going to pay sales tax as a 3, 4, 5-year-old. Your birthday money is going to be taxed when you buy those Mickey Mouse ears. Until the day that you die and your estate pays sales tax on that coffin that they're going to bury you in, if you're lucky to be able to afford it after they're done with our estate in this economy. You're going to pay those taxes, which means that government is not supporting. There's no such thing as government money or state money.
No.
There's only your money and my money. It's called tax money. It was ours to start with. And they're going to tax each and every parent, tax each and every student to pay for K-12, 40% of your tax revenues and a bunch of other things that you pay that you don't even know about for life. So there's no question that as parents, you're going to pay for your K-12 education. The only question is whether you're going to get what you paid for. The only question is whether the children in the inner city are going to get the education that I'm paying for to make sure that they get. And I'm not resenting it. I'm just saying I'm writing the check. I'd like these kids to get the education that we're paying for. That's the thing, because that is the huge investment. It's being misguided. In the state of California right now, they're spending over $20,000 per year per child. Now, what does that mean? Average class size, 20, 25 students. That's about average. Let's make it, instead of $21,000 per year, let's make it $20,000 per year, which means the average classroom in this state is taking in $500,000 per year in revenue, right? For those 25 kids. They claim they don't have enough money. That's a lie, isn't it?
Yeah.
$500,000 per classroom.
My goodness.
Right. 500, which means that you take the average 25 kids is South Central, Los Angeles, the Heights, Logan Heights, down there in San Diego, wherever you want to go. $500,000 a year. Those 25 students on average will have $6.5 million spent on them, K through 12. And what do we get? What do we get? 48th in the nation. And these people dare tell us they don't have enough money. I'm telling you, if it was a private enterprise that the government was putting that kind of money into, it long ago would have been shut down as a criminal enterprise, and its operators would have been put in jail for fraud. At the time is long past. Well, we need to take our children, take our money, and get the heck out. That's just the basic of it. And that is the expurgated version of my views. All right?
Yeah,
the family-friendly version.
Well, thank you for expounding on that, Michael. And a lot of parents got made aware of how bad things were when they got to look over those computers when children were home. That exposed so much of what's happening in the classroom. Parents didn't know the evil, that the curriculum that was being taught to children until they had a chance to watch it online themselves and see, whoa, wait a minute, what is this?
Yes.
So they found that out, and I think it was a blessing in disguise, not COVID, but it was blessing in disguise that parents were able to see what was being taught to our children.
Divine providence.
Yes.
Yeah, that is how God always draws something good out of what is something bad. And that is really bad. And the parents were able to see it. And when you stop to consider also that they shut the schools down and wouldn't even teach,
Yeah.
completely disrupting everybody's lives, right?
Yep.
What was
Unnecessarily.
right? And then to reopen here in LA, the United Teachers of Los Angeles had a completely unrelated political agenda that they wanted implemented as a condition to returning to their jobs. So, this just left all parents, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Catholic, Protestant, Evangelical, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, whatever, and let everybody with their heads exploding over what in the world we were doing. And for the first time, really for the first time, we started looking at that. And Dolores, as I often discuss in my presentations throughout the state, I like to point out that our current system of schools really didn't exist 100 years ago when this kicked into a place. Except in certain urban areas, as we ended the 19th century and started in the 21st, this vast network of government owned and operated and union controlled, massive multi-$100 billion operations, it just didn't exist. We schooled and educated our children differently, often at home. Black literacy was greater coming out of slavery and going into the 20th century than it is now. And this was terrible. Even under black homes were intact, all of that sort of thing. But the social engineers and our own industrialists, including Henry Ford, Rockefeller, even Carnegie, who was a great patron of libraries and so forth. All of these people had a different vision of America, that we're all going to have to get organized. And even though we weren't socialist or fascist, we had our own industrial vision that required that we educate students and direct them so that we could become part of this great American manufacturing industrial machine. All right, think of it what you will, but it became something different. And mostly that system was designed to make everybody think the same and to conform to this new vision.
Yeah.
It wasn't as dark as always, but by the time you get to the 80s and 90s, you see people moving into control of these institutions with very different visions, very different views, and really not very American.
Yeah.
And what the system had in common was that it was there to indoctrinate and ultimately to teach us to obey. One single thing, to obey. Not to obey our parents, not to defer to our religious leaders, not to defer to other thought leaders, but to defer to the government, to think like the government. And that became the place where we dispensed all kinds of government largesse and welfare, with psychological service. Abortion, they take your children and go get your daughter an abortion without telling you. Now they want to give a puberty delay drugs, all these sorts of things. The government supplanted the parents just as surely as the Soviet Union had or the Nazi system had. That's where we are today. Our problems in America began 100 years ago, Dolores, when we first turned our children over to the government for this thing they call education. And we're not going to be able to turn this country around or our state unless and until we first take back our children, their hearts, their minds, their souls, and our education. And that's why we say in California to remember, it's your kids, it's your money, and it's your choice. And I want you to go to californiaschoolchoice.org and sign up there. learn where and how to sign the petition, donate some money there, give us a little bit of love, and most importantly, become involved in your church, at your school, in your community. Become a leader, because nobody else is going to do this for us, Dolores, except you and I. You know, when we ask God's help, and we do that, when I wake up in the morning, I look in that mirror and I see the source of 100% of my problems and 99% of my solutions. God sent us. We're the solution. It's not coming from anywhere else. And so that's why I'm proud to be here talking to you and working with all of your wonderful audience here and throughout the country. This battle for school choice here is our battle in California. It is the battle of everyone in California. We're the leaders. The future is always invented in California. And since 1849, the gold rush, California has defined the future of the United States of America. And this is our responsibility to regain our leadership in education and in self-governance. It's been a pleasure to be with you here this morning.
Amen. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. And thank you for all those golden nuggets.
You're welcome.
You have shared today. And that's why I want to, before I end, I want to thank Stacy Gaona for introducing us. And,
yes.
And she said, well, you need to talk to Michael. I said, okay, you set it up.
Yeah.
So I want to thank Stacy for bringing you this way. And the information that you shared is invaluable to parents, not just parents, but to people who care about kids, who care about this country and this state, and want to see things go the right way, the way that it was intended to from the beginning when God founded this country on the Constitution. And you know, America is so unique, Michael, because no one else has a constitution like this country. No one else. And
one thing that I talk about often, we have the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments given to us in the Old Testament. And my view is that the 10 Commandments tells us how we ought to live, how we ought to live together. The American Constitution tells us how we might actually be able to do that, to live with each other, by defining the scope of the individual, granting him or her freedom of conscience, of action, without injuring other people. Nobody else has figured it out as well. Our Constitution over the last 200 and some years has served us well.
Yes.
And we need to continue to embrace it. And our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and all these things that we're talking about here are still the most revolutionary ideas in the world. They are a threat to Putin. They are a threat to everybody here in the United States and to the Chinese government and the totalitarians in this world and the totalitarians in our state. We scare them. These ideas are so scary. The First Amendment, the Second Amendment together, our rights, a due process, and the whole idea that government derives its consent from you and from me and not from them. We don't get the right to live from them. We don't go to them and say, hey, what can I do? Mother, may I please? No, we're born American, not black, white, brown, or whatever, but red, white, and blue. That's our Constitution. That's time for you people to go. Just shut up. Just go. Just go. We need to get rid of them. And they're getting very, very aggressive. But I'm telling you, Dolores, when we first turned our kids over to them 100 years ago and let them do what they did, Dolores, they knew that you and I would put up with it. If we put up with that, we put up with anything. And they were right, weren't they?
They were.
We put up with that, and then we put up with darn near everything. Well, now we need to disabuse them of that notion, take our kids back and say, we're not going to put up with it. And we are your nightmare here. We're black, white, brown, and yellow all together in the single enterprise. We call ourselves American. And I'm telling you, Americans, have scared the hell out of totalitarians for the last 100 years, whether they're German, Japanese, Italian, or some bureaucrat version here in the United States. We scare them to death. And that's why we have to get together and do this. And, I don't think it's going to take that long to turn things around if we start with our children.
Yes.
We start there, we could turn around just as fast as they did, believe me.
Yes. And that's what we see happening in our country from the top leadership right now.
Oh,
the destruction of America right before our eyes.
yes.
And
Right.
Too many people don't see the destruction of this country taking place brick by brick. America's
Yep.
been torn apart right from the top down through those in government.
Brick
And
by
that-
brick, child by child,
Yes,
mind by mind.
that's right.
There's a lovely letter, lovely lady, Denisha Merriweather. I forget the name of her children's foundation or something like that. I'm going to interview her here soon, but she launched this other operation called or marketing logo, Black Minds Matter, right? So
Yes.
yeah, every mind matters, and that's why
That's right.
they know that. That's why they want control. That's why they want to control, teach you how to think about yourself. Mostly it's the government unit.
Yep.
All right.
Michael Alexander, thank you for being my guest today. And to my listeners and viewers, I want you to go to californiaschoolchoice.org and take a stand for our kids. And to each of you, my audience, thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. If you have a message to share or would like to be a sponsor on this podcast, please contact me at dwsviewstandup@gmail.com. Remember to subscribe to my podcast to get the latest recording. Share this message with your friends and on social media. Be sure to join in next week. We will have another guest at DW's View Stand Up. If we do not stand up for what we believe, who will?